Chapter 1. First glance, forgotten flames. The city breathed with its usual rhythm, a pulse of distant sirens, heels tapping on concrete, and the deep hum of traffic drifting through the humid July air. Lunaburg City wasn't known for silence, and Daniel Stone preferred it that way. Silence had a way of forcing thoughts to the surface, and Daniel had long ago decided that some thoughts were best left buried. He moved through the crowd like a shadow, black hoodie, headphones in, gaze steady. His office was just 3 blocks away, but he always took the longer route. Past the little bookstore with yellowed windows, past the cafe that played jazz at sunrise, past the mural of 2 faceless figures holding hands. That mural always made him pause, though he never understood why. Daniel worked as an interior designer. Minimalism, warm tones, soft lighting. People trusted him to create beautiful spaces, but he couldn't seem to make his own apartment feel like anything but a holding cell. Still, the work gave him structure, control, and control, he had learned, was safety. This morning, like every morning, he stopped at a tiny corner cafe called the Copper Cup. He didn't need caffeine, not really, but the girl behind the counter had a way of smiling without smiling, and something about her felt familiar. Elena, her name tag read. He'd never asked her name aloud. He preferred mystery. Elena Reyes had learned to live with the ache of unfinished memories. Ever since she was a child, she'd had dreams, the same ones, again and again. A boy, a field of tall grass, something falling from the sky like ash. A voice calling her name. Then nothing. She never spoke of it. Most people didn't believe in memory fragments, especially the ones that came wrapped in emotion. Lunaburg City was a place where stories got swallowed in concrete and steel. Elena made peace with that. She loved the noise, the lights, the anonymity. She worked at the Copper Cup not for the money, but for the rhythm. The espresso machine hissed like breath, the cups clinked like wind chimes, and every morning around 8:23, the same guy walked in, ordered a black coffee, and stood too long by the mural across the street. He never made small talk, never smiled, but his eyes, they were sharp, restless, like they were searching for something. Daniel. She learned his name once by mistake. A business card fell from his pocket as he reached for change. She gave it back without comment, but her heart had tripped in her chest. She didn't know why. Something about him felt like an echo. That morning, like clockwork, Daniel stepped into the Copper Cup. Elena was already mid-shift, ponytail slightly messy, sleeves rolled up. He noticed her hair had a copper tint in the sunlight, like autumn leaves. "Black coffee?" she asked as always. He nodded. "Thanks." She turned to pour the coffee, and as she did, her bracelet slipped down her wrist. A delicate thing, silver, with a single blue stone. Daniel's fingers twitched. That stone, he didn't know why it made his stomach tighten, but for a second, he couldn't breathe. "Here," she said, sliding the cup toward him. Their fingers brushed barely. Static. Then a flash, grass, smoke, a girl crying. A boy running. Daniel blinked hard. The world snapped back into place. "You okay?" Elena asked, her brows drawn just slightly. "Yeah," he lied. "Just didn't sleep well." She nodded, but something in her eyes lingered. She felt it too. Not the memory, but the pull. That night, Daniel walked home slowly. He kept seeing the bracelet. He didn't know how, but he was sure he'd seen it before. Not recently, not even the last decade. But the shape, the color, it lived in a part of him he didn't visit often. He stopped by the mural. The 2 faceless figures stood in the dusk, holding hands, framed by city lights and forgotten graffiti. Something about them felt unbearably lonely. Elena sat in her tiny apartment, flipping through old photo albums. Not hers. She didn't have any from childhood. These were thrifted finds, things she collected from flea markets. She liked giving forgotten moments a home. But tonight she was searching for something else. For the face that haunted her dreams. She could never quite see it, just a blur of dark hair, eyes that never looked away. She touched the bracelet on her wrist. Her mother had given it to her when she was 7, with no explanation. "It was yours before. You just don't remember." She thought it was a strange thing to say. But now it felt like a clue. The next morning, it rained. Heavy and sudden. Daniel walked into the copper cup soaked, hoodie dripping. Elena laughed, a soft, surprised sound. Didn't bring an umbrella? No, he said, brushing water from his brow. Didn't think the sky would betray me today. Her lips quirked. Maybe you try to wash something clean. He looked at her then, really looked. And for the first time, he asked, do you believe in déjà vu? She paused. You mean like the feeling you've lived something before? Yeah, all the time. She lowered her voice. Sometimes I think it's the past leaking into the present. Daniel's eyes narrowed. What if? What if you felt it with a stranger? Elena held his gaze. Then maybe they're not a stranger. That day, Daniel didn't go straight to work. Instead, he sat on the far side of the cafe, by the fogged-up window streaked with rain, coffee growing cold in his hands. Elena moved behind the counter, graceful in motion but distracted, like her thoughts were one step ahead of her. He watched her, not out of curiosity, but need. Something in her presence calmed the ache that had started to stir inside him. When she finally took a break, she slid into the seat across from him, surprising them both. I don't usually do this, she said quickly. Sit with customers. I don't usually sit, he replied. I just couldn't leave. There was a quiet between them then, not uncomfortable, just heavy like the air before a storm. I had this weird dream last night, Elena said suddenly, eyes on her cup. There was fire, smoke, and a boy calling my name, but I couldn't see his face. I never can. Daniel's heart kicked against his ribs. That's strange. It's not the first time. I've had it since I was a kid. She looked up, eyes wide. Sorry, that's probably a lot to dump on someone I barely know. But Daniel wasn't smiling anymore. What if you do know me? She stared at him. Sometimes I dream of a girl, he went on, voice low. We're standing in a field. She's holding something, a stone, maybe. There's fire in the distance. Then she disappears. Elena's hands trembled. I always thought it was just my mind playing tricks, she whispered. Maybe it's something else. Their eyes locked. And for a moment, the cafe, the city, the sound of rain, all of it dissolved into a charged silence between two souls recognizing each other without knowing why. Then someone opened the door, and a gust of wet wind shattered the moment. Elena stood up quickly. I have to get back. Daniel nodded, but something had already shifted. Neither of them could pretend this was casual anymore. That evening, Daniel found himself back at the mural again. Only this time, Elena was already there. She stood beneath the flickering street lamp, umbrella hooked on her arm, head tilted up toward the faceless figures. I used to think they were sad, she said without looking at him. But now I think they're waiting, like they're frozen in time until something brings them back. Daniel stepped closer. The air between them hummed. Why here? He asked. Elena glanced at him, eyes distant. I don't know, but I feel something when I look at them. Like I've been here before. Like this exact moment already happened, just years ago. Lightning flickered in the distance. Without thinking, Daniel reached for her hand. Their fingers touched, and in that instant, another flash behind his eyes. Children running through tall grass, laughter, then screaming. A girl slipping in the dark. A silver bracelet lost in the soil. Elena gasped, yanking her hand back. You saw it too, she breathed. Daniel nodded slowly, shaken. We've met before. When I was 8, she began, my mother and I moved to the city. She never told me why, just said we needed to start over. I used to ask about my childhood, where we lived before, who my friends were, and she'd always change the subject. Daniel sat up slowly. Do you remember anything? He asked. She nodded faintly. There was a boy, dark hair. I think he used to draw birds for me. I don't remember his name. Just the feeling. Like we were always together. Like we were each other's world. He swallowed hard. That's the same dream I've had. The birds. She finally turned to face him. What does it mean? Daniel shook his head. I don't know. But it's not just dreams anymore. It's real. Something happened to us. Something we've both forgotten. Elena lowered herself beside him on the couch, their knees brushing. You know what's crazy? She said. I don't feel afraid. Me neither. They sat like that for a long time, watching the morning creep into the city. Cars passed. People hurried, unaware that something had shifted, that somewhere in the chaos of coffee and meetings and gray buildings, Two forgotten hearts had just found each other again. Later that day, Daniel skipped work for the first time in over a year. Instead, he took the subway to the edge of the city, to a district he hadn't visited since childhood. It was mostly residential now, but something told him this was where the answers lived. The air here smelled different, older, softer. He wandered through the streets aimlessly until he saw it. A faded sign with half the letters missing. Winson Children's Center. The building was boarded up, long abandoned. But something about the gate made his heart thud in his chest. He stepped closer, peering through the cracks. A courtyard, a swing, a patch of wild grass struggling to survive. And in the center, a dead tree with a carving on the trunk. 3 initials, barely visible now. D-I-I-I-A. Daniel stared. A memory crashed into him, jarring, too fast to process. A girl laughing. A boy holding a stick. A third child, standing just outside the circle. Watching. Someone else had been there. That night, Elena got a text from an unknown number. Do you remember the tree? Because I remember you. Hey. Her breath caught in her throat. She looked around the room, but she was alone. The dreams weren't just dreams. The past wasn't finished, and someone else had returned. Chapter 2. Traces of a Shared Past. The next few days passed in a blur of touches and questions. Daniel and Elena were nearly inseparable, like gravity had finally snapped them together after years of drifting. They spent long hours walking through the city, hands always brushing, gazes always lingering. The connection between them grew fast, deep, and impossible to ignore. There were moments of silence that spoke louder than words, like when she rested her head on his shoulder on the tram, and he softly kissed the crown of her hair. Or when their hands found each other under the table in a crowded cafe, without even meaning to. But even in the warmth of their bond, the unknown still lingered like smoke under a closed door. Especially after the message. Hey, you didn't answer it? Daniel asked. They were curled up on Elena's bed, the rain tapping against her windows again. The soft glow of the bedside lamp painted everything in amber. She shook her head slowly. I didn't want to open something I wasn't ready for. Do you think it's someone we knew? I don't know, she whispered. But it felt old, familiar, like someone who used to stand in the corner of every childhood photo I don't have. Daniel wrapped an arm around her, drawing her close. Then we face it together. That night, Elena dreamed again. But this time it was different. The grass was taller. The sky was on fire. She was running, barefoot, clutching something warm, a hand. Daniel's. Behind them, a child stood alone. A boy, younger than them, his face streaked with tears and ash. His eyes, dark, unreadable, stared at her like she had betrayed him. Aidan. She woke with a cry. The next morning, she told Daniel everything. The name just appeared in my head, she said, pacing her kitchen barefoot in an oversized hoodie. Aidan. That was him. The boy behind the tree. The one who never spoke. Daniel leaned against the counter, arms folded. I think I saw his name carved next to ours. Do you think he's the one who sent the message? He nodded. If he is, then he remembers everything. And we don't. Later that day, they met at Daniel's apartment. It was the first time Elena had seen it. Clean, minimal, almost sterile. Feels like a place someone would design for someone else, she said gently. Daniel looked around, surprised. I guess I've been building other people's homes while living in a shell. She smiled and slipped off her coat. Then let's fill it. He watched her walk toward the window, hair glowing in the late sun. She looked like she belonged here, like she'd been missing from every room until now. And when he stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, it felt as natural as breathing. They didn't speak for a long time. Their kisses were slow, reverent, as if making up for years of distance. His hands in her hair, her breath on his neck, the space between them burning down to nothing. She traced the line of his jaw, her lips brushing his skin like a secret. I've wanted this, she whispered. Me too, he murmured, even before I knew your name. Afterward, they lay tangled in sheets and sunlight, skin warm against skin, hearts slowing in sync. Elena rested her head on his chest, listening to the rhythm. You feel like home, she said. Daniel kissed her forehead. So do you. But even as they held each other, a A shadow stirred in the corners of memory. And Aidan waited. The message came again the next evening. This time not as a text, but a letter. No envelope. Just a folded page taped to Elena's apartment door. You forgot me, but I never forgot you. Windsong. Saturday. Sunset. Come alone. Hey. Elena stared at the note for a long time, her fingers trembling. Daniel read it twice, jaw clenched. It's him, he said. It has to be. I should go. Not alone. She looked up at him. He said, I don't care. I'm not letting you face this without me. They arrived at Windsong Children's Center just before dusk. The place looked even more haunted in the fading light. A skeleton of its former self, windows shattered, the garden overrun with weeds. Elena took a deep breath. It feels like something's buried here, not just memories. Daniel squeezed her hand. They stepped through the broken gate together. The courtyard was empty, but strangely intact. The swing still creaked in the wind. The tree in the center, older, thinner, stripped of leaves, stood like a forgotten monument. Then they saw him, a figure sitting on the swing. He stood slowly as they approached, hands in his pockets. A little taller than Daniel, wiry pale, dark eyes, shaved head. His face was unfamiliar, and yet something about the way he tilted his head, the way he narrowed his eyes, it sent chills down Elena's spine. Aidan, she said quietly. He smiled. So you do remember. Her breath caught. Just your name. He nodded. That's more than Daniel gave me. Daniel stepped forward. You were here too? Aidan's smile faded. We were everything. The three of us. Until you left. No one left, Daniel said. We were separated. We were kids. You don't remember the fire, do you? Elena, Stefaned. The fire was real. Aidan's voice dropped. You caused it. Silence. Daniel's face darkened. That's not possible. I saw it, Aidan whispered, stepping closer. I saw you run. I saw you take her hand. You left me behind. Elena's voice trembled. Aidan, we didn't know. We were scared. You forgot me, he repeated, softer this time. Both of you. Like I never mattered. His eyes glistened, and for a moment, he looked like the boy they once knew. Fragile, desperate, lost. Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but Aidan raised a hand. I don't want revenge, he said. I just want you to remember. I want you to feel what it's like to be forgotten. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the crumbling building. They didn't speak on the way home. The air was thick with something they couldn't name, guilt, maybe, or grief, or fear of what else they didn't know. Back in Daniel's apartment, Elena curled into his arms. But something had shifted. He's not lying, she said softly. We heard him. We were kids, Daniel replied. She looked at him. But we still did. That night, Elena dreamed again. This time, it wasn't smoke or fire, it was water. She was standing in a lake, the sky heavy with storm clouds. Aidan was on the shore, reaching out, but she turned away, swimming toward Daniel, who stood in the deeper water, calling her. She woke with tears in her eyes. The next morning, Elena stood alone in front of the mural, the one with the faceless figures. She hadn't told Daniel she'd left the apartment. She just needed air, to think, to feel something besides the comfort of his touch. Because ever since Aidan appeared, the shadows of her childhood, once poetic and distant, had taken shape, and they frightened her. Meanwhile, Daniel hadn't slept much at all. He sat on the floor of his apartment in the early light, scrolling through online archives, forums, and digital library records. He searched for any mention of the fire at Windsong Children's Center. And then he found it. A single, forgotten article buried in a 2004 local newspaper archive. Fire breaks out in abandoned dormitory. Cause unknown. 3 children found. 2 returned to care. 1 relocated. Aidan, where did you go? He asked. His voice was calm, but it carried an edge, worry dressed as gentleness. I just needed to walk, she said, avoiding his eyes. You didn't trust me enough to say something? It's not about you, she whispered. It's about who we were before we became us. He took a step back. Are you saying you regret it? No. She shook her head quickly. But I'm scared that if we dig too deep, we won't recognize ourselves anymore. That same evening, another message arrived, This time a letter slipped under her door. "You left me once." She silently handed him the photograph. His hand trembled as he held it. "I remember that bench," he said softly. "You had a scraped knee. I drew a bird on your hand so you wouldn't cry." Elena stared at him, wide-eyed. "You used to draw birds?" "Always," he said with a faint smile. "I wanted to fly away." That night, they didn't touch. They lay in the same bed, but a careful distance apart. Not because the love had vanished, but because it had become terrifyingly real. 2 days passed. The city moved on, unaware of the storm quietly forming in 3 hearts that once beat together. Daniel had grown quiet. Not cold, just watchful. Elena felt it. His distance, like he was bracing for something he couldn't name. And Aidan, he didn't send any more letters. Not yet, but they both knew it wasn't over. That night, Daniel returned to Windsong one last time, alone. He wandered through the ruins until he reached the tree again. He knelt down, brushing dirt and weeds aside until he found it, a rusted box barely intact. Inside, wrapped in rotting fabric, a drawing. A child's sketch, crude and faded, but unmistakable. 3 figures. Aidan, Daniel, Elena, standing beneath the tree. But what stopped his breath was the fire in the background, a jagged orange cloud drawn above the dormitory. And above them, in thick black crayon, the word "run," and scrawled in the corner, barely legible, a signature. Aidan, age 7. Daniel came back shaking. Elena met him at the door. "I went back," he said. "I found something, a drawing Aidan made." He showed her the sketch, and she stared at it like it was a ghost from a forgotten world. "I think he lit the fire," Daniel whispered. "But I don't think he meant to." Elena didn't answer. Her fingers tightened on the paper. "I remember screaming," she said slowly. "I remember smoke, and someone pulling me. Was it you?" Daniel nodded. "I took your hand, and we ran." "What about him?" "I thought he was behind us." I didn't look back. The silence that followed felt longer than it was. Then, a knock at the door. They froze. Elena opened it. Aidan stood there. No anger this time, just exhaustion. "I wanted to burn the pain away," he said. "I was angry. I didn't mean for it to grow. I just wanted someone to come back for me." Daniel stepped forward. "Why didn't you say something sooner?" "Because," Aidan said softly, "you forgot me. Both of you. And I needed you to feel that." Tears welled in Elena's eyes. "You didn't have to scare us," she said. "We were lost too." Aidan looked between them. "I didn't come to destroy anything. I came for peace. But now I see. I was never part of this chapter. Only the prologue." He stepped back. "This time I leave by choice." And then he was gone. That night, for the first time, Daniel and Elena spoke without walls. About the center, the fire, the bond, and how the memory of it, though buried, had shaped everything they became. "It wasn't your fault," Elena said, cupping Daniel's face. He rested his forehead against hers. "It wasn't yours either." They didn't run from each other that night. They faced the dark, together. Chapter 3. The Light Between Us. Summer arrived quietly. No grand announcements. Just longer days, warmer mornings, and the sound of birds returning to the balconies of Lüneburg City. It had been 3 weeks since Aidan disappeared from their lives. No messages, no letters, only silence and, strangely, peace. Daniel and Elena were different now. Not completely, but the edges of them had softened. They knew the weight they carried, and they chose to carry it together. They spent more time in the apartment now, not hiding from the city, but learning how to belong to it, to each other. Sometimes, Daniel would sketch quietly in the mornings. Elena would brew 2 cups of coffee, even if he forgot to drink his. She said the smell of it was enough. One evening, she came home to find the living room filled with candles. Dozens of them, flickering softly across the walls. And in the center of the room, taped to the window, was a mural-sized drawing. It showed a bird, wings wide, made entirely of broken lines. But in the heart of the bird was something different. 2 silhouettes standing close, surrounded by light. "It's unfinished," Daniel said, stepping beside her. "I wanted to be real first, not just imagined." She touched the paper gently. "This is us." He nodded. "The broken parts, too." Later that night, they lay on the couch, limbs entangled, breath calm. "Do you ever wish we'd never remembered?" she asked. "No," he said, "because remembering helped me see you for who you really are." She smiled. "And who am I?" He kissed her forehead. "The girl who saved me once, and didn't even know it." The next morning, Elena walked into her cafe shift with a strange brightness in her chest. Her co-worker, Maya, raised an eyebrow. "You're smiling at 7 a.m. Should I be worried?" "I'm in love," Elena said simply, tying her apron. Maya grinned. "Well, damn, that explains the glowing." But even as she laughed, Elena's thoughts wandered to the past, not with fear anymore, but with quiet grace. She remembered a dorm hallway, a sketchpad, a boy's hand reaching for hers in the smoke, a promise whispered, maybe even before they had words for it. "Don't let go." And they hadn't. 1 week later, Daniel brought her somewhere she hadn't expected, a rooftop garden above a bookstore. "I found it by accident," he said, "and thought maybe it could be ours." They stood there, above the world, hands intertwined. The air smelled of jasmine and old pages. And the city, their city, spread out before them like a page waiting to be written on. "Will you stay?" he asked suddenly. Elena turned toward him. "Stay here, with me, in this life, this version of us, not just a memory." She didn't hesitate. "I already did." And then she kissed him deeply, fully, not to forget, but to anchor herself in the present. Elena sat on the floor of their apartment, surrounded by dust-covered boxes, old journals, photos she hadn't looked at in years, things from her first year in the city, before Daniel, before the dreams returned, before the weight of memory had reshaped her soul. She held up an old Polaroid, a shot of the sky through her bedroom window. It wasn't sharp, it wasn't beautiful, but it was honest. And suddenly, she wanted that again, the quiet pursuit of what was real. Not perfect, not framed for likes or gallery walls, just captured. That evening, she found Daniel on the balcony, sketching a street below. She leaned on the doorway. "I want to take pictures again." He looked up surprised, then smiled. "Good. You should." She walked over, sat beside him. "I don't want them to be pretty." He handed her a pencil. "Then let them be true." The next morning, she dug out her old analog camera. She cleaned it, loaded film, and began shooting again. Not people, not poses, but moments. Coffee steam, a cracked window on the subway, a couple arguing softly outside a florist's, Daniel asleep, mouth slightly open, sketchpad still in his hand. She called the project "The City Undone." Daniel, in turn, had a surprise of his own. He led her to a small studio space he'd rented. Nothing fancy. Just one room, brick walls, paint-stained floors, a single skylight. "I've been saving for this," he said, nervous. "For years." He walked to the center of the room and pulled a cloth off a tall frame. It was a painting, still wet. It showed Elena, standing barefoot, her face blurred by sunlight. Behind her, 3 shadows walking toward the light. She covered her mouth. "You remembered this?" "I didn't just remember it," he said. "I've been carrying it." Tears welled in her eyes, but they weren't from sadness. It was recognition. She had always feared that remembering would break them, but instead, it had made them whole. Later, lying on the studio floor, she whispered into his chest, "We're not just healing each other, are we?" "No," he said. "We're becoming." The gallery was small, tucked into a quiet corner of Eastside. No red carpets, no critics in black coats. Just soft jazz, clinking glasses, and light that made even silence glow. Elena stood near the back wall, breath caught in her throat. On display were 12 photographs, her first public showing in years. No captions, no filters, just moments. A mother asleep on a bus with a child in her arms. A broken bike leaning against a tree. Daniel's fingers stained with charcoal. A reflection of her own eyes in a rain-slicked window. The final photo was different. It was of a rooftop garden at dawn. Sunlight caught in her curls. Daniel standing behind her, out of focus but unmistakably present. It was called "The Light Between Us." People wandered in, whispered things like raw, honest, unusual. But she wasn't listening. She was watching him. Daniel stood by the entrance, hands in his coat, eyes locked on her. He didn't move toward the photos. Didn't need to. He already knew each one. When the crowd thinned, he finally came over. You did it, he said. So did you, she answered. They didn't speak for a moment, because the silence had changed. It was no longer the space between them. It was the space they now shared. That night, they returned to the rooftop. The garden was quiet, lit only by string lights and moon glow. Below them, the city pulsed softly, not as a threat, but as a rhythm. Daniel reached into his coat pocket and pulled out something folded. A letter. Not new, aged and worn. I found this in my old sketchbook, he said, handing it to her. I wrote it years ago, after the fire. I never sent it. I didn't even remember writing it until last week. She opened it slowly. Dear Elena, I hope you're still out there. I hope you still dream. I still draw the birds. But they don't fly without you. Maybe one day we'll find each other again. And when we do, I'll remember your hand. I'll never let go this time. Daniel. She looked up at him, eyes shining. You remember my hand, she said. Every day, he replied, even when I forgot everything else. They stood at the edge of the roof, breeze winding around them. You know what I realized? She whispered. He shook his head. That we're not made of what broke us. We're made of what we chose to rebuild. Daniel smiled. Then let's keep building. And there, beneath stars older than any memory, they kissed. Not like people escaping the past, but like people who had walked through it and come out holding hands on the other side.